Reconvene this meeting of the Board of County Commissioners, January 24th, 2017. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. We have a number of things on our agenda. The first is a second reading and public hearing on ordinance number 16-12 in the matter of amending Lane Code, Chapter 6 to institute tobacco-free county parks. Today we have Mr. Mike Russell, our Parks and Animal Services Division Manager, with us. And while we're here today, Mike, I wonder if you could acknowledge some of the members of the Parks Advisory Committee who are with us today.
Be glad to.
Thank you.
Chair Farr, Board of Commissioners, Mike Russell, what am I? Parks and Animal Services Division Manager. Yes, this is an item of ordinance number 16-12 regarding tobacco use policy in Lane County parks. I'd like to acknowledge Parks Advisory Committee Chair Wayne Lemler, who's in the crowd, as well as our Vice Chair, newly elected Vice Chair Mary Brorby, and our former Chair, Pat Hoover, is here as well. Wayne is here if you have specific questions about the Parks Advisory Committee process, which I will also discuss. Let me get my presentation going here. So just to get everybody up to speed, I want to go through kind of the process that this ordinance has taken over the last several months. Community Health Improvement Plan, which was adopted in 2013, identified tobacco reduction, and specifically a strategy in the Community Health Improvement Plan to increase tobacco-free places, including parks. As a result, in March 2016, the board discussed the state parks policy and requested input from the Parks Advisory Committee on that. Parks Advisory Committee on May 9th had their initial discussions, May 9th, 2016, and then they held a hearing in June where they heard public comments and subsequently voted 6-1 to recommend adoption of a total tobacco-free parks ordinance, complete ban, no tobacco use. That recommendation was presented to the Board of Health in August. And then in September, staff presented that recommendation of a total ban, and the board also wanted discussion about the state parks policy for your consideration at that time. The board asked staff to return with a draft ordinance consistent with the PAC recommendation for their consideration, so a total ban. So that ordinance was presented for a first reading in October, and we set a public hearing November 1st, 2016. At your November 1st meeting and hearing, the board ultimately voted not to adopt the proposed ordinance and asked staff to come back with a new ordinance that included exemptions for designated campsites and developed overnight camping areas, and then also a tribal exemption for federally recognized Oregon tribes as part of their traditional religious, medicinal, or customary cultural heritage practices. Board also asked at that time that they wanted further input from the Parks Advisory Committee, considering, you know, we had been talking about the campsite exemption, but the tribal exemption was something a little new. So I think the board's desire was to get Parks Advisory Committee input on that as well. So the PAC did reconsider the new ordinance language, which included the two exemptions at their November 14th, 2016 meeting. That ended it with a 3-3 vote to support the proposed language. And I want to provide some context for that tie vote. Because of the direction given to staff to come back specifically with the two exemptions, the PAC may have felt precluded from considering each exemption on its own, that they had to consider it as a package. Even though staff tried to explain that they could provide their own recommendation, I can see how there was some confusion about that. It is my feeling from participating in the discussion from their November 14th meeting that there was support for, general support for the tribal exemption, but there was no, I don't think the PAC felt like they had the ability to completely debate the campsite exemption because of this feeling that they had to take it as a package of the two exemptions. I can see this, where this may have contributed to the PAC members feeling like their ability to process the new ordinance was limited. And so I just want to, that's kind of the context of that 3-3 vote, and let you know that, you know, there was never staff's intent to marginalize PAC's recommendation. In fact, the PAC's process, they've been very diligent in providing you recommendation, feedback, and very thoughtful in their deliberations about this, and holding their own public hearing and considering over several meetings what the policy should be. So I don't want to minimize the work that the Parks Advisory Committee has done to get to this point. So here's the proposed language for the ordinance. It's relatively short. It's a new section of Lane Code Chapter 6, 0.597. And this is the language. It refers to the definition of smoking or use of any tobacco products that's currently in Lane Code in Chapter 9.00. That definition is very broad. It includes smoking by means of inhaling lighted cigar, heated cigar, a weed plant. It also includes electronic smoking devices, and that tobacco product specifically is very broad as well, whether it's a substance derived from tobacco which can be consumed by smoking, heating, chewing, absorbing, dissolved, inhaled, or ingested by other means. So it's a very broad definition of tobacco products and smoking, and I just want to highlight that for the board again, that it's not just smoking cigarettes. So if approved, if the proposed ordinance is approved by the board, Parks will implement the ordinance as a new park rule, and we're proposing an 18-month transition period where we will update park rules online and in our reservation system for both campsites and day use sites, implement distinctive signage throughout the system, train campground contract staff, and educate park users over the next recreation season coming up here. Public education regarding the new rule will be the primary enforcement action taken by staff over the next 18 months. The combination of signing, education during public contact, use of friendly persuasion will all be used to implement the policy. Citations will be used as a last resort. That's my presentation. I wanted to give Karen an opportunity to provide her context, as well as being heavily involved with your priorities involving the CHIP and tobacco use in Lane County in general.
Thanks, Mike. Chair Farr and commissioners, I will just briefly touch on a few comments. I know we've been talking about this subject a lot, so I won't belabor it, but certainly for viewers or people who haven't been tracking on the conversation, wanted to underscore a few pieces of how it is we came to be here. As Mike mentioned, it has been a priority in the Community Health Improvement Plan, and that's largely because tobacco remains the leading cause of preventable death in our state and in our county. So we have a number of strategies we're looking at to decrease tobacco use, and looking at parks was one of those strategies. Certainly a whole host of jurisdictions have gone before us in adopting similar policies. Not only the state of Oregon, the National Recreation and Park Association has made that recommendation nationally, and we have our own local jurisdictions. I hope I won't leave anyone out. Cottage Grove, City of Eugene, City of Veneta, Willamette, there may be others, have all adopted tobacco-free parks policies as well. So we would be in alignment with that. One of the things we talked about with the Parks Advisory Committee as well as the Public Health Advisory Committee is certainly the health rationale for adopting this type of policy. I'm happy to answer questions on this again. I know we've talked about it a lot. I would summarize by saying that we're looking at this as a strategy that is certainly supportive of health, both in terms of discouraging youth smoking and then also really supporting environments for people who are trying to quit. We know it's really hard to quit tobacco, and so increasing the number of tobacco-free public spaces helps support people who are trying to quit, who might have allergies to cigarette smoke, other things. And then specifically with parks, we talk about it also as a strategy that addresses litter, and other toxic substances that are left behind, as well as addressing fire danger. So there's a rationale beyond just the health rationale as well to consider this policy. Mike talked a lot about the history, and I think the only thing I would add to the assessment of the discussions at the Parks Advisory Committee, it did end up in a 3-3 split. My assessment of that is that everyone in the room supported a change in the current policy, and there wasn't really agreement on which way to go, whether it should be a complete ban or adopting the exemptions. So I just wanted to be clear, I didn't hear any voices on the Parks Advisory Committee saying we should keep the current policy. And I'm happy to answer any questions as you move forward.
Thank you. Before I invite questions from the Commission, I have a couple of clarification questions, and maybe Mr. Clark, you may be the one to answer one of them at least. We have before us Ordinance 1612, which has the replacement language in 6.597, or insertion language in 6.597. And the last time you brought the ordinance before us, we didn't pass it. We sent it back and said, write a new ordinance. So you came back with a new ordinance. This is what we have before us. Now, question for you, Mr. Clark. If we were to change wording on the insertion portion of this, would we need to go through the complete process of bringing a new ordinance back? Or could we delete, for instance, delete some of the language and continue with passage of the ordinance today with deleted language?
I'll reframe the question a little bit, I guess. I mean, to answer the first, there wouldn't be any need to come back with a whole new process and ordinance. And the question is whether you need an additional reading of this ordinance in order to pass some amended version of this ordinance. When I say this ordinance, I mean the ordinance and the code that it would adopt. And the answer to that later question is it depends. I think our office is usually taking the position that if what you're doing is deleting some of the language there, that's not a substantive addition or change, and therefore you could do that today, as long as it were read out that way. If you're making a substantive change to the words that are there, adding more words, that would require a second or a third reading, I guess, at this point to adopt that.
And a follow-up before we enter the public comment. Specifically, let's take 16.5972A, which says in designated campsites, etc. Let's say we had a motion to remove 2A from this. Could we pass it as it stands without 2A?
Yes, I think you could, as long as the revised version were read out verbatim by somebody here.
Just wanted to make that clear to everyone who may be participating today that that is an option to do. Okay, very good. Then questions from the board. Commissioner Bozievich.
So, question for Karen again, and I'm going to ask the same question I've been asking for over a year. Do you know of any objective, evidence-based, peer-reviewed studies that say outdoor-only smoking bans, not including workplace or indoor smoking bans, actually have an impact on reducing tobacco use?
Chair Farr, Commissioner Bozievich, we've given you the research that is available in terms of smoke-free places and tobacco-free places and their impact. I don't believe any of those were specifically on parks. So if that's what you're asking for, I believe that research isn't out there. At least I haven't been able to find it. But certainly what we've been able to provide is on other tobacco-free places and the impact that that has on uptake and use of tobacco.
Yeah, and every one of those studies includes workplace bans in their study. So it's not really apples and oranges even close to whether a park outdoor ban has an impact or not. there's a completely different situation when you're going to ban in a workplace. So I just want to make that clear that there is not a study out there specifically on outdoor bans that says it has an impact on public health. That every study we've been presented wraps in workplace smoking bans.
Thank you, Commissioner Posevich. Commissioner Lycan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mike, this question is for you. And as we know, we receive counties receive 45% of RV fees statewide based on the formula set up. And of course, that comes from state parks. So if we were to pass, if we were to eliminate and then put a ban on the campsite, would we potentially could be in trouble with as far as not being consistent with state parks and maybe lose out on those dollars? Is that something that you may know or do not know?
Yeah, I can answer that.
Sure.
Chair Farr, Commissioner Lycan, the formula based on the formula used to make that allocation uses population, RV fee registrations within the county, and the number of campsites. It does not include policy requirements in that, so no. Designating a smoke-free campsite does not impact our RV fee revenue.
Thank you. Further questions before I open the public hearing?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Stewart.
So, Mike, I asked this at the last one, but I just want to get it on the record again today. So as I read Section 2, Subsection A, in designated campsites and developed overnight camping, to me, that sounds like it gives a flexibility to, because I've heard, we had testimony today, we've also had testimony last meeting where, maybe not all of them are smoke campgrounds or allow smoking in every one of the campsites. Maybe there's an area that's designated non-smoking. So does the language here today, and if the board said, we expect there to be a mix of smoking versus non-smoking sites like a motel, do you believe you have the ability to implement that if this is passed the way it's written?
Yes, I think we can do that the way it's written, designate specific campsites as non-smoking and proceed that way, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? No further questions. Ms. Russell, I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing. At this point, I will open the public hearing and call for any signups. Thank you, Devin. Excellent. We have 8 people signed up, and we'll use the same procedural rules as we do with the normal public hearings that we engage in. You'll have 3 minutes to make a statement. At the end of 3 minutes, you'll hear a signal designating that 3 minutes is up. At that point, please wrap up the thought that you're making and pass along the mic to the next person. When you approach the podium to speak, please state your name and your address for the record. At this point, the first person we have is Elizabeth Bohr. Thank you. And we'll be followed by Heather Armheim. Thank you.
So my name is Elizabeth Borum, and my address is 71513 London Road, Cottage Grove, Oregon, 97424. And I want to thank you very much for all you've done for helping the health of our county, and I really appreciate your efforts in this direction. I'm thrilled with the progress you've made thus far, and it was a deafening contrast when I was up in Alaska recently, and they're like 50 to 100 years behind us, and I really appreciate what I've seen here. I remember a time when I could hardly take my children to city or county parks because I didn't want the young people that brought their stuff, whether it be tobacco or marijuana or other things. I didn't want my kids to see that, and also I don't like to be around secondhand smoke. So I'm grateful that we're taking stands. Of course, it's too late. My children are grown up, but I'm grateful. I'm an RN at McKinsey-Willamette. We had a smoke-free campus for a short period of time, which was wonderful. We went to designated areas, which is sort of, now I'm not sure that everybody just stays in the designated area, and sometimes it gets confusing to enforce. I noticed this on the ferry, the Alaska Marine Highway ferry. They had some designated spaces on the ferry, but then people were smoking in other locations, and I went and talked to the purser because we had pitched a tent on the back, and all that smoke was coming into it was hard to sleep. It was pretty bad. But, it was hard for them to enforce it since they had allowed some spots. It was hard to know how long out those spots went. Anyway, it kind of complicates things not to have the no smoking, completely no smoking. And so my request would be, if you're going to make any stop smoking area, I would say to just, obviously what the tribes have to do, I'm not going to complain about that, but I do think that it's going to make it less complicated for you having a standard and implementing that standard. The other thing I was going to encourage is if you do a total ban, not only is it a good example to our young people as to what's acceptable, and it increases the health from the side smoke and everything, but you have much less liability with injuries because people that, obviously if they normally smoke and come on, it might not increase or decrease of liability with injuries, but there is more likelihood of injuries with smokers, and I won't go into that science. There's less liability, less injuries, less fire hazards, and that's, I guess, the main thing I would say is that I think it's healthy to have a complete ban on the campgrounds.
Thank you, Ms. Borer.
Thank you.
Next, we have Heather Ammerhein, followed by Tamara Miller. Heather, please correct me on your pronunciation.
Yes. Good afternoon. My name is Heather Amrine, and address is 3171 Gateway Loop in Springfield, Oregon. And I work as the Director of Health for United Way of Lane County, and I coordinate the local Community Health Improvement Plan, also known as the CHIP. And as you know, the vision of the CHIP is to work together to create a healthy community where all people can have the opportunities for a healthy life. And both the first and second CHIP have included a focus on tobacco prevention, with the goal to increase the number of tobacco-free environments in our community. And research demonstrates that establishing tobacco-free public areas contributes to less smoking among adults and young adults, reduces how socially acceptable tobacco use is perceived to be, reduces the triggers that act as barriers to people quitting smoking, and provides people who want to quit or who have quit the opportunity to be effective. And since the beginning of the CHIP, Trillium, Peace Health, and United Way have all become tobacco-free. And so Lane County remains the only major CHIP partner that isn't tobacco-free. And just an additional thing is, from my understanding, it's a requirement for over $500,000 of grants that Lane County Public Health receives from Oregon Health Authority to have 100% tobacco-free county properties, or at least a plan to have 100% tobacco-free county properties. And just as a testimony to the impact we've seen at United Way since our implementation of a tobacco-free campus policy, 2 of our current employees used to smoke cigarettes, and like the majority of people, they wanted to quit. And by passing a tobacco-free campus policy, we were able to provide a healthy environment for our employees to support them in making the healthy decisions that they wanted to. And so right now, United Way is proud to say that none of our employees currently use tobacco. So as community leaders and CHIP partners, I think our organizations all want the same things. We all want everyone in Lane County to be able to live, learn, work, and play in places that support their desires to be healthy and thriving. And there are so many places in our community, like the Lane County parks, other parks, et cetera, that exist to promote that health and happiness for kids and families. But the reality is that if those places allow smoking and tobacco use, they aren't family friendly and they aren't in a healthy environment. But there is a solution, and I think as CHIP partners, we have the responsibility to provide those healthy environments for members in our community. And next year, in 2018, when we look back and celebrate the accomplishments of the CHIP in the past year, I really look forward to tobacco-free county parks being one of those accomplishments. So thank you.
Thank you. Tamara Miller, followed by Susan Blaine.
Good afternoon, Chair Farr and Commissioners. Tamara Miller, 3374 Talon Street in Eugene. I wanted to first start with a visual aid. This is a picture from Lane County's website. It's a picture of families at a park. Notice the RV in the background, and nobody's smoking in this picture. This is from your own website. So I'm here today to speak about Lane County tobacco-free parks. Thank you for the work you and the Parks Advisory Committee have done on this topic so far. I have followed the path of this ordinance through the Parks Advisory Committee and the Commission. I would like to encourage you to support making all parks, including campsites, 100% tobacco-free with the exception of tribal practices. The majority of Lane County residents are not tobacco users and desire smoke-free facilities and amenities. Considering the small minority of Lane County residents who do smoke, making all Lane County parks tobacco-free will make our parks more appealing and popular with users and campers. Oregon counties who have made their parks tobacco-free have reported an increase in use and enjoyment by their residents. Members of the CHIP have asked at meetings why CHIP partner Lane County's properties are not 100% tobacco-free like all other CHIP partner properties. The CHIP partners need your participation and support to fulfill the tobacco-free goals of the CHIP in regard to Lane County properties. I have heard offered as an alternative to 100% tobacco-free parks having some areas of campsites where smoking would be permitted. I submit to you that providing designated areas for smoking may seem like the compassionate thing to do, but the best support and cessation opportunity we can provide tobacco users is making all parks and campsites 100% tobacco-free. This is because making properties and amenities 100% tobacco-free has been proven to work in helping those who smoke to stop or reduce smoking by not providing them an area to smoke. Enforcement will also be easier in a place that is 100% tobacco-free, both for parks employees and by empowering parks users to ask others not to smoke, thereby self-enforcing. A place that has areas where smoking is permitted is not a healthy place, it's not a family-friendly place, and it does not help smokers in their desire to quit. If I may, having a non-smoking section in a campground is like having a non-peeing section in a swimming pool.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Susan Blaine, followed by Ellen Otani.
My name is Susan Blaine. My address is 770 East 11th Avenue in Eugene. Good afternoon, Commissioners and Chair Farr. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of smoke-free Lane County Parks. I'm the Director for Community Benefit and Advocacy at Peace Health Oregon Network. Peace Health is a partner in the Community Health Improvement Plan, and all of Peace Health's campuses and properties in Lane County have been smoke-free since 2006. We support tobacco-free Lane County parks and believe strongly that Lane County needs to join the rest of its CHIP partners in making all Lane County properties, including the parks, 100% tobacco-free. The Lane County Commissioners have endorsed and are supportive of the Community Health Improvement Plan, establishing an expectation that they would be supportive of the CHIP initiatives, which include creating a tobacco-free environment. By supporting tobacco-free county parks, including tobacco-free campsites, we are creating a healthy environment where families can recreate and children can enjoy the outdoors in a healthy environment without exposure to smoking behaviors. We encourage you to change the social norms that say it is okay to expose families and children to harmful behaviors in public places, and replace these with policies that promote healthful, smoke-free environments and encourage youth to make positive decisions about their own health behaviors. Thank you.
Thank you. Ellen Otani, followed by Miroslav Sting.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Ellen Otani from North Eugene, Commissioner Farr's district. I would like to make a request that as part of this discussion of the two exceptions that are being proposed to the smoking ban, that they be discussed individually, each one on its own merits. I realize that any final vote must be on a single order. However, the exceptions are so unlike one another that a preliminary discussion and decision on each one individually becomes important. The Parks Advisory Committee's original vote was 6-1 for a total ban. The more recent 3-3 tie by which the proposal they were given actually failed allowed them to give you no information about what their feelings were on the two proposals individually, and that's the important piece of information that you would need to have today's discussion. It's the reason, not the result of the vote, that matters. And I would like to second Mr. Russell's assessment of the PAC's work. I've attended PAC meetings for the past year and a half. I found the committee members to be knowledgeable, hardworking, dedicated, and respectful of both one another and the process. They tend to follow instructions. Even though their individual positions may diverge, they are still well-researched, thoughtfully reasoned, and based on their sense of the needs of the park-using public as a whole. It is important that you receive their input, all relevant input, unfiltered by others, on both major policy issues and park acquisitions. Much has been made of the issue of establishing trust between the general public and the Parks Division. The Parks Advisory Committee is the key. The only way for us, the members of the public who own the parks, to trust you as stewards of those parks is for the PAC's direct input to be part of your decision-making process. Thank you.
Thank you. Miroslav Sting, followed by Pat Hoover.
Good afternoon. My name is Miroslav Stingu. I live on the address 1811 Bennett Creek Road, Cottage Grove. I was born and raised in a different country that had no tobacco banned places, so tobacco was allowed everywhere. And it is not a nice sight. Sometimes if it was an enclosed room, the smoke was so thick that you couldn't even see the person 5 feet away from you. And when I moved here, I appreciate very much the tobacco-free places, indoors and outdoors. And I do realize that it's healthier for everybody if they don't smoke. And that's one of the reasons that I chose not to smoke. And this smoke-free county parks seems like a very good idea to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Pat Hoover, followed by Mary Borby.
Hello. Chairman Farr, Commissioners, Mr. Mokrzycki. My name is Pat Hoover. I live in District 4. I am here as with two different hats, once again, as the former chairwoman and vice chairwoman of the Parks Advisory Committee. When the smoke-free issue came up last May, I was on the committee. I have since resigned. I'm also a park user. Excuse me. I think that in the beginning of this whole issue coming up, that the PAC was very nearly unanimous in their decision to recommend to you that the parks be totally smoke-free. That was in May and June of last year. And it was a pretty resounding vote. And with good discussion, Karen brought great information to the PAC at two different meetings. We were not, however, given all the information we should have been given by park staff, because in that discussion, we should have been given the state park rules so that we could have observed that there was the Native American piece in the park exemptions on a state level. We didn't know that, and I think in June of last year, you may not have known that. So that was why that wasn't added into our recommendation. In August, when the presentation came to you from park staff, I attended that meeting. I was the only PAC member here, and Mike's right. The PAC was under the impression that staff would be supporting the PAC's recommendation. That did not happen. The park staff was in a completely different place on that. And the PAC felt that we had, in a way, been thrown under the bus. We had no idea. I would have rounded up many more of my PAC members to come testify to you in August, the reasoning for our wanting smoke-free parks. So you called for a work group, and I said, then the PAC needs to be at the table at that work group. We haven't been heard from yet. And I thought that three of us came up to the table, and all of us had a great discussion. It was good back and forth brainstorming about the issue, and I think at that point you voted 3-2 in favor of the PAC's recommendation for total smoke-free parks, and not for the staff recommendation, but for the PAC's recommendation. However, the wording needed to be worked on, and by that time you knew about the Native American piece, so that got taken back for more rewording. In the meantime, I resigned from the PAC in September, so I have not followed along the other 4 PAC meetings with what's going on, but I am wanting you to know that I still firmly believe that we should have smoke-free parks with no exemptions except the Native Americans. And I think you need to know statistically that we have 5 campgrounds in our parks, and the other 67 parks have no campgrounds at all. So those will automatically be no smoking. But to exempt the campgrounds and say smoking can happen there I think, is a mistake for all the reasons that we're hearing from public health and Lane County United Way and everything else. I firmly think we need smoke-free parks across the board, and that would be a healthy and safe feature for you to support. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hoover, and thank you for your years of service on the Parks Advisory Committee. We have Mary Borby as the last person who has signed up.
Good afternoon, Chairman Farr and Commissioners. I'm Mary Borby. I'm a citizen, and I'm also on the Parks Advisory Committee. And Mr. Mokrahysky, your name's kind of like mine. I live in South Eugene, so I'm from the Commissioner Sorensen's area, although I represent Commissioner Stewart. As a member of the PAC, I'm asked to represent my fellow citizens in various issues related to Lane County parks. Regarding the issue of smoking, of the citizenship that I've reached out to randomly and taken conversations about the smoking, the consensus is they want no smoking in the parks, including the campgrounds. All right, that's other committees I volunteer on in this community. It's just people I meet on the parks paths and stuff when I'm out in the areas, and it's just around town. So again, the park was asked to bring to you a recommendation regarding this issue. We voted 6-1 to present a total ban in the parks. The PAC's original recommendation was approved by the board in a 3-2 vote, not including the Native American or cultural traditions regarding tobacco use, and was the weakness of the writing of that recommendation. In my opinion, the tribal and cultural issues should be the only exemption in the final ordinance, and has similar acceptance by the citizens I spoke to. And I want our citizens to have a voice, and I want it to be heard by the board, and that's done through the Parks Advisory Committee. So we do have some good things to add to this, so thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Borby. That concludes the list of people who have signed up today. We are currently here conducting a hearing on Ordinance 1612, smoke-free Lane County parks. Is there anyone else in the audience who would wish to address the County Commission at this point in time on Ordinance 1612? Seeing none. This is on Ordinance 1612. Okay. step forward and state your name, and step to the mic and state your name and address. This is for ordinance 1612.
Okay. My name is Russell. We're at 150 S Street, Springfield.
Is Russell your last name, Mr. Russell?
Eskew is the last name.
Russell Eskew, thank you.
Agent.
Okay.
Which one is the commissioner for that area?
State the address again.
150 S, right
In
behind
Springfield?
Safeway at the Pioneer Parkway. That would be Mr. Lincoln. Okay, thank you, Mr. Lincoln. And now, what's this statute that we got? 112, you said?
No.
What was it?
We are speaking to ordinance 1612, which is smoke-free parks, and this public hearing is restricted to discussion of smoke-free parks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
From what I was hearing, it looks like we want to have the Indians or the natives be able to have their smoke ceremonies at the parks and whatnot. And I'm in favor for that. I like that idea. And it's good to be able to be up here and say that, you know, and put my round table chair on the issue. So, yeah, I like that idea.
Excellent.
Huh. You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Eskew. And this thus concludes the public hearing. Anyone else wish to address the board regarding ordinance 1612? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and ask commissioners for responses, questions. Commissioner Sorensen.
I'm interested in knowing, I know that this started out as prohibiting parks or prohibiting smoking in parks, but I heard some testimony about how Lane County's participation in the health improvement program would be furthered by extending this to all county land, so maybe inserting the word land or after the word parks or in place of the word parks would be an amendment to this that would broaden its application. I wonder if you could give us a little perspective on that. Are we supposed to be moving toward stopping smoking on all county facilities, not just parks?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner, that we will have that discussion related to a smoke or tobacco-free campus policy in the coming weeks. So we haven't received direction from the board, but that it is a policy issue that we plan to bring to the board for discussion and direction before.
But I'm asking about the adopted chip that these other partner agencies are trying to cooperate with us, and apparently that is a ban on smoking and tobacco products for all, not just the county and not just the county properties, but also all of the partners in the chip, not just the hospital or just the county or the city of Eugene, but all of them. So I just want to get perspective on that.
Certainly, in terms of the chip that exists, yes, there is support for increasing the amount of tobacco-free spaces in the community. That was true in the last chip, and that continues into our current chip. As the county administrator was saying, we've chunked it out into a couple different topics, and you may recall, I want to say it was maybe last August. That might not be right. It might have been last June. We gave you a tobacco update on 4 different tobacco-related issues, and we've kind of been bringing them to you one at a time. We've got Tobacco 21 that's coming up for a first reading. So the issue of the overall tobacco-free campus hasn't really come to the board for a full discussion yet. As the county administrator was saying, the plan was to bring that, but at this point, the conversation with the advisory committees and the work on this ordinance to date has specifically been around parks.
Okay, so we wouldn't have to narrow it down to parks if we wanted to come into compliance with the chip. We wouldn't have to narrow it down because apparently the chip's already said, well, we want all these partners to have tobacco-free policies. So we don't want the hospital to set up hospital rooms where you can smoke in a hospital room, because they're part of the CHIP, so they want to have where you can't smoke at all at the hospital. What the county apparently is, we're getting ready to like do it one at a time, as opposed to smoking in, say, the respiratory care area, as opposed to the cancer ward. You could smoke in one, but not the other.
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Sorensen, I'd say a couple of things. One, we do restrict tobacco use inside county. Of course, there's a state law that restricts use of tobacco within public facilities. So that exists today. There's a state law that restricts smoking within 10 feet. Yes. 10 feet of entrances. There's a city ordinance that further in Eugene, city of Eugene, that further restricts smoking and use of tobacco within 25 feet of entrances. So that is all on the books today. Our CHIP partners, as I understand, as was mentioned earlier, have made the decision for their respective entities and their respective facilities to institute tobacco-free campus policies. So that's I guess what we're saying is that is an issue that will come before the board for discussion direction. We have not received direction on that issue. What we have received direction on is what's in front of you as it relates to tobacco-free policy in parks and adjusting the legal age for purchase of tobacco.
Thank you, Ms. Mokro-Heisky.
Did that make it any clearer or answer your question?
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Sorensen. Commissioner Lycan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think the question was asked about taking each of the exemptions one by one. The Native American is a federal, actually, it's federal, so it's not just state. So that's from a federal standpoint. I believe I'm the only commissioner that asked that we include permitting in campgrounds. And I think if you look at my career in public office, I think I've been pretty consistent on as we look at adopting policy that we need to, my feeling is stay consistent with state. And it was no different when the city of Eugene moved forward on the ban of smoking in restaurants and bars. And we had folks from Eugene come over and visit Springfield and say, would you follow suit? We said no. We'll wait for the state law. State law came in about a year later, and the ban then proceeded. And so it's no different. I think most of my decision making really comes down and pretty consistent, making sure that if I'm not interested in creating Lane County into an island, and I expect the state to probably do a ban within on the parks and the campgrounds. I believe that's coming. But where we are today, I'm just asking that we just stay consistent with our campgrounds, the state campgrounds, because the reality is, when folks come to a campground, many times they don't know if they're going into a state park or a county park, and that's truth. They're not aware. What they're going to do is pay their fee. They're going to park. They're going to camp, and when they think they may think they're in a state park. If we ban this, they're in a county park, and they're going to ask, "What happened? How did I miss that?" That's all. That's really what it is. I've stated before. I've never smoked. Nobody in my family smokes. We don't smoke. We don't chew. If the federal government were to ban tobacco products tomorrow, I would probably lead the parade. I don't care about it. It's something that we don't do. And most of my friends, people that they don't smoke. And we never have. And so we've tried to, from that perspective. So that has nothing to do with a personal issue. It really is a consistency issue. That's just where I'm at. If the board decides to move forward on the ban of all parks, I can obviously live with that. But the reality is, my feeling is just try to be consistent because of the fact that I think more times than not, people, when they go to a park, they really don't know if they're going to camp. Most of the time, they actually do not know if they're going into a state park or a county park. And so that's where I'm at on that. And hopefully that's to answer your question. Because, like I said, I believe I was the only commissioner that actually asked this to be included. And I'm getting the feeling that it may not be at the end of the day. And if it is, if that's the case, as I said, I can live with that, and we'll move forward. But that's where I'm at on that. And I hope folks can just respect where I'm at on that. But if you look at my 18-year career, it's been pretty consistent on that from that perspective. I was never interested when I served as mayor in Springfield being an island, and I'm not interested in Lane County being an island too. I voted no on the 21 proposal as well for that very reason. And again, I stated that I think it's just as easy for somebody living in Junction City to go to Harrisburg to buy cigarettes if they're 19 years old and it's 5 minutes away, and that's in Lynn County. And but that's where I'm at. And one thing I have appreciated very much has been the conversation and the debate and the importance of this issue. And with regards to the CHIP plan, there's no doubt about it. I would like for the state actually to step up to the plate as well and take a look at this from a broader perspective. And I would hope that those folks who are passionate and coming to the county board would be just as passionate in writing to your state representatives and your state senator on asking them to place an all-out ban on campsites within the state park systems too. If that were to be the case, then I would have no issue. And if it passed today with this in place and the state went forward, I'd be the first to say then we need to bring this back, reconsider it, and do a ban on the campsites here in Lane County. So that's where I'm at. And but again, I'm very appreciative of the testimony, the facts. I probably, for a 5-year-old in a swimming pool, they probably wouldn't care where a peeing area is. They would just do it anyway. So anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Lycan. Further discussion? Commissioner Stewart.
Thank you. So I would reiterate what Commissioner Lycan said. The Section 2, subsection B, the allowance for tribal use is federal law. I don't think we need a lot of discussion about it. If we don't include it, we're breaking the federal law. So I'm glad we've put it in there, and I'm glad I questioned why the state had it and we didn't consider it. I do have a question for Karen. It was stated, about our grant and becoming a smoke-free properties. If there's this designated campsite component still in there, of course, then we have some properties that are allowing smoking. So how does that impact the grants and what the testimony that was given?
In terms of our parks policy, I would have to say that since it would be in alignment with the state's tobacco-free parks policy, I don't believe the state would give us any grief about that.
Okay. And, I certainly supported a complete all-out ban earlier when I found out we didn't include the tribal component. And, out of respect for Commissioner Lycan, to have a discussion about campsites and bringing it uniform with the state policy. Certainly am welcoming of that conversation. I also, there was testimony this morning outside the public hearing that talked about the fact that, discrimination against folks that don't have the resources to go out and do anything except for maybe camp at their campsites and use the product. To me, I've been a little bit concerned about the fact that, is this discrimination against a class of people that can't afford to do anything else? And it just seems to me like we could roll this in. I mean, as was stated earlier, all but 5 of our parks would be a complete ban out of the 70 plus. And then, if we would keep track of and not designate all the campsite smoking and keep track of how many of the smoking campsites are requested versus not requested, maybe we learn this next year that, hey, we're not going to impact anybody or 5 people if we do a complete ban. And to me, it seems like that might be a pretty prudent way to go about it. But I guess I want to hear from other colleagues and see if what their thoughts are.
Thank you, Commissioner Stewart. Further discussion? Then a couple of items. I'm glad Commissioner Lycan discussed the City of Eugene's smoking ban in restaurants and bars, which went back to 2001 before it was preempted by or added to by the state. You know, that was before the Eugene City Council in June 2001, 7-1 vote in favor of smoking, banning smoking in bars and restaurants in the city of Eugene. I was the one vote against that. There was a 7-1 vote with me voting in opposition. And the reason that I voted in opposition at the time was because of many of the things that Commissioner Lacken just stated, that people could go down the street and smoke in an establishment. But my reasoning today is different. The reason that I do support a complete ban on smoking in our parks is different. The difference between a state park and a county park does not cross a jurisdictional line. The difference between the Embers on Highway 99 and the Prairie Schooner a mile away on Prairie Road is much more stark. You cross the city line. And people who had been going to a business establishment, which was the Prairie Schooner, the Embers, would find it much more attractive to them as smokers to go to the Prairie Schooner just a short distance away. Proved to be the case, absolutely. And it was a business level playing field that I was considering at the time when I was a 7-1. I have this, every single person in this room, and I challenge anyone to stand up who has not had their life affected by smoking cigarettes. Somebody they know, love, has been affected. Everybody does. So I'm not going to talk about my personal situation. But I was that 7-1 vote. This is a different situation. State parks are often inside the same jurisdiction, certainly in the same county, sometimes in the same city. Actually, county parks aren't in cities, I guess, but you're not crossing jurisdictional lines, and there's no unlevel playing field associated with it. And the second thing that is different about this is that the state is not on the verge of changing their rules. So we can't say, let's wait for the state to change it and we'll all change at the same time. I don't see that changing in state parks in the near future, whereas with a smoking ban in restaurants and bars in 2001, I did see the change coming down the road very, very quickly, which did ultimately create a level playing field so the Prairie Schooner and the Embers have the same set of rules as far as smoking is concerned. So this is different. And while I did certainly consider the uniformity of the law, of upholding the law, I find it fairly easy to understand a no smoking sign at the entrance to a park. And also, our parks aren't only camping parks, and state parks aren't only camping parks, but you know, we're pushing forward with a ban on non-camping parks. So personally, I prefer the approach where we are sending the message that we simply do not allow smoking ultimately on all Lane County property. Ultimately on all Lane County property today, we're talking about parks. So that being said, we have before us Ordinance 1611. Commissioner Sorensen is raising his hand to speak. As we move forward with a motion, we can act on this today or not act on this today. I hope we do act on it today. If we act on it today, we can act on it as it stands, or we can make an amendment to the written Ordinance 1612 that's in front of us. Commissioner Sorensen.
So I have a question and a motion. My question is the second, paragraph 2 with the A and B. The state parks have B. Do the state parks have A?
Yes.
They have A and they have B.
Correct.
Okay. So we would be, if we took out A, we would be in effect stopping smoking and tobacco product use in all county parks. Okay. All right. So I'd like to make a motion to adopt the language with the exception of deleting all of the language in A, getting rid of the paren, B, paren, and just having the language of what is up there as B be the only language. And so we would have we'd have the federal recognition of tribes, but we would have the complete ban on tobacco usage in county parks. Doesn't go as far as I'd like, as far as stopping tobacco use throughout the county land and buildings, but it does give us a movement toward that, and ultimately I think that is the way to go, and I think it's going to be a better public policy than than trying to manage an exemption. And if that doesn't pass, then I guess we'll drop back to the next best thing. So that's my motion.
So the motion is to adopt the language prescribed by staff other than to delete section 2A and make section 2B the new 2A. Okay. We have a motion before us. Do I have a second? Motion dies for lack of second. We have before, then we have ordinance 1612 before us, which is the entire language as prescribed by staff, which includes 6.597 as read, as printed both in the agenda and on the overhead.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Stewart.
I'd move approval of ordinance number 16-12 as written.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion to the motion. Commissioner Bozievich.
Thank you. So I want to preface my comments with that I have not agreed with the CHIP strategy on outdoor bans from the beginning. As staff knows, I've objected to having that included in there for reasons that, I questioned above, which is there is no scientific evidence that they have a meaningful impact on reduction in smoking and smoking behaviors or initiation of smoking in youth. I'll also preface that with, I've been asked to be the statewide spokesman for the Tobacco 21 movement because I believe in that because it has been shown to be an effective method of preventing smoking, and particularly in youth. For me, it's not about whether this is tobacco or not. It's about what's effective and what's important. The other thing for me is also not wanting to take the tyranny of the majority over disliked minority. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm traveling all over the weekend, thus my dress. That's important to me. And tobacco users are that disliked minority. And it's really easy for us as a majority of non-smoke, no one on the board here smokes, I don't believe, to go, I really don't like that. I mean, there's all sorts of things people don't like in an open area. People that wear perfume set off my wife's asthma, but she's not going to ask for a perfume ban in parks. She'll just move away from the person that's wearing heavy perfume. Parks and county properties are public property. Peace Health, Mackenzie Willamette, that's private property. If you wish to ban tobacco use from that property, you have every right to as a private entity. Even United Way, that is private property. We are the public and public property. And when we choose to ban something, and particularly something that folks are addicted to a legal product in the U.S., we are telling that portion of our population, you're not welcome on public property. And that's an important distinction for me. And I'm not willing to say you're not welcome because you're a disliked minority. And we heard testimony this morning in public comment about an inclusion ordinance. Here we are excluding a disliked minority from public property with this ordinance. So I'll be voting against this ordinance because Prohibition 1 never works. Measure 91 passed because people are starting to realize that. And I don't believe there's any just cause or scientific data that says this will actually have an impact on public health. And whether the state wants to try and yank some money away because we won't go to tobacco-free campuses, I'll deal with the state legislature when that comes up. Just like we're being threatened about sanctuary status and federal money, I'm willing to go up against the governor and the state if they want to try and yank our tobacco prevention money because we won't go to tobacco-free campuses, because I want folks to feel like they can come and address government, even if they're a smoker, and they need to step out of a 3-hour meeting like we have and have a cigarette somewhere nearby and come back so they have their chance to speak to us in public. That's important to me. So I feel this is a feel-good, do-nothing law that actually picks on a disliked minority, and I'm going to vote against it.
Commissioner Lycan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to the Park Advisory Committee, I just want to say thank you very much for all your work. I really do appreciate it. And I would say it's very rare when an advisory committee makes a recommendation and brings it to a full board that the board may not go with what the recommendation is, because you do all the heavy lifting, and I really recognize that. In my career in Springfield, I can only think of maybe just a couple times that the city council went against, say, a recommendation from the planning commission. And in fact, I will point out there was one recommendation of the planning commission. If the city council decided to move forward, there will be a Home Depot built right next to Albertsons, what's called Marcola Meadows. So I'm not sure. So sometimes we don't always agree, but Mr. Jerry's here would not have liked that. But anyway, but to the PAC, this has nothing to do with the good work that you do. Absolutely not. And I really, really appreciate the fact that you're willing to volunteer for this and dedicated, because it is a dedicated group. And I just want to say thank you very much for all your work, not only in this, but for our parks plan as a whole. And it's much appreciated. And because some of you are here today and you took time off to be here. And I want to say thank you for that. And to Pat, who's our legend, and thank you for being here too, Pat, and for all your, I know Chair Farr mentioned for your service to the PAC in the past. I, for one, have been very, very appreciative of that. So that's really what I want to say. Thank you very much for your service.
Thank you. Further discussion, Commissioner Sorensen?
Thank you very much. Well, I would prefer to be talking about a smoking ban in all of Lane County parks, but we're not going to be talking about that because that motion wasn't seconded. So what we are going to be talking about is whether or not we're going to have smoking in designated campsites and implementing what we understand to be the federal law as applies to public parks within the state of Oregon. Obviously, I feel that the language in Section B is important because, as we have been told, that's required for all public parks in Oregon as a result of interpretations of tribal rights within the state of Oregon. As to the designated campgrounds, this could be, of course, a very large, opening through which a very large truck could be driven. And we could have even up to, in all designated campsites, smoking could be allowed. But I don't think that's the intent of it, and I think that a minimal approach to the designation of those campsites is the better way to go. And ultimately, I think that we are on the road to doing something good by enacting this this ordinance the way we see it on the wall. So I just wanted to say that I am in favor of this motion.
Thank you. Further discussion? Then a couple of things that I'll add. First thing I'll say why I didn't second Commissioner Sorensen's motion. In order for the chair to second the motion, I would have to relinquish the chair and second the motion as just a regular as a non-chair or non-vice chair member. Actually, the vice chair can second a member of the committee, and that's a kind of cumbersome method of doing it. And in that my second would only be the second vote in the affirmative, I made the decision to not relinquish the chair to make the second for that motion. Otherwise, if I'd been sitting in another seat other than this one, I would have been the second to that motion. We'd have had further discussion on the amended ordinance. As it is, we're discussing the ordinance as you see it up on the board. And I'd like to say, Mr. Russell, you probably heard some of the discussion up here that designated campsites doesn't necessarily mean every campsite, that it can be designated as a smoking campsite. I think that this is a big step, making Lane County parks non-smoking, and while we don't fully agree on the entire final outcome, the outcome's a good outcome. It's not the best of all possible outcomes in my mind and the way I look at it, but it's a good outcome. I couldn't believe it when the University of Oregon said that they weren't going to allow smoking in Autzen Stadium. How about that? You got 60,000 people go in there 7 times a year or 8 times a year, and they've been smoking. They used to smoke in the stands sitting right beside me, and then they eliminated smoking in the stands, then they eliminated smoking from the perimeter, then they eliminated smoking from the parking area. My gosh, if 60,000 people can quit smoking for that entire period of time, I think it's a statement that we can move forward in a very aggressive manner in helping people to not make the decision to start smoking, or B, help them with their decision to stop smoking. So I think I'm pleased to say that we're moving forward with the vote on this ordinance at this point in time. And Ms. Mokrahajski, this is an ordinance, so this will require a roll call vote. So I'll call for the vote, please.
Commissioner Sorensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Bozevich?
Nay.
Commissioner Lyken?
Aye.
Commissioner Stewart?
Aye.
Commissioner Farr?
Aye. Passes 4-1 with Commissioner Bozevich in opposition. Thank you very much to the Parks Advisory staff. Thank you for all the folks who testified today. Thank you for the work that's gone into this for not just 1 year, really much longer than 1 year. And we're moving forward with the designation of Lane County parks other than designated campsites, and for federally recognized tribal members as no smoking areas. Just one quick question. When does that take effect? You said 18 months?
That's correct. We'll take the next 18 months to phase it in, begin our education process. We'll try to get signage up as soon as possible, be phasing it in. We have over 70 parks that we have to provide notice around and provide enforcement in. So staff is asking for a little time here to implement the policy.
We'll look for administrative procedural work on that. And then when it comes time to make decisions on designated campsites, should that decision be made, would that be a Lane manual decision, or is that simply administrative rules?
As I perceive it now, the new code change would give the Parks Director the authority to make that call as he or she sees fit, I think based on perceived need, so he has the flexibility to adjust it.
Thank you. And I believe we have issued marching orders. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioners.
For the rest of the day, we'll be in the hands of our sheriff and staff.
And our attorney.
So before us, we have item 14A, Order 1701-2407, in the matter of delegating authority to the county administrator to execute a contract with Oregon Department of Corrections, DOC, in the amount of $146,000 to provide offender reentry services for 6 female inmates.
Thank you, Chair Farr, members, commissioners. Real quick, I'll go over this. I think this was originally set on the consent calendar, but it was requested we cover it a little more in detail. So I'll do that. I have with me Lieutenant Clint Riley, who's assigned to the Corrections Division as more of a topical expert on this. So I'll give you a high-level overview, and if you have questions, then we'll work to answer that. So essentially, the Sheriff's Office has had a long-standing contract with DOC for a number of services, including the transitional leave. Typically, this is involved mostly men. I'm sure you have heard DOC statewide is seeing a prison population. They're, I think, calling it a crisis with female prisoners in the system. We're seeing an increase in local female population in the local jails as well. One of the concerns is that if they can't control their female population, that this will then impact the Justice Reinvestment House Bill 3194 monies that we're relying on for some of the local treatment and services that we're providing here to focus a reduction in the number of inmates we send to the state prison system. So in an effort to be a broader statewide community partner and to offset some of that pressure on the state system, we agreed, along with several other counties in Oregon, to increase our capacity for the transitional leave services, specifically for females. So this contract amendment, excuse me, It's an amendment of an existing contract with DOC for transitional leave, but this specifically sets aside an additional 6 beds that are exclusively for female prisoners that meet the transitional leave criteria. And then a portion of these funds in this contract cover our cost at the sheriff's office for providing that service, and then the other funds also go to sponsors, that is the other partner locally in that transitional leave, in the treatment and education portion of that. So essentially that's kind of it in a nutshell, and if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer those.
Thank you. Questions for Sheriff Trapp or for Lieutenant Riley? Welcome, Lieutenant Riley. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks, sir.
Commissioner Bozevich.
So I don't really have many questions, but I just want to take a moment to point out, one of the reasons why Lane County is being asked to help the state with their female prison population problem, because we don't want to have to build another prison because it would cost the state a lot of money in a time where they're looking at this large, well, whether it's a deficit or whether it's just not as much money as they really want. As Commissioner Farr pointed out this morning, but it's really about not building that next prison. And there's a reason why there's only a few places that can actually help the state, because there's a certain certification that you need about prison rape prevention in order to house these female inmates from this program. Can you talk a little bit about the fact that Lane County has this certification and how many other counties have it at this time?
Yeah, we're one of the first, I think we might have been the first county jail in Oregon to become PREA certified, Prison Rape Elimination Act. So,
it's a pretty impressive thing. I think we were the first jail, not prison, jail that was certified to meet the requirements and go through the audits so that prison rape elimination. And that's really an important aspect of this. And it's really great that Lane County is able to help step up and prevent opening that next prison facility. I think they actually have one built. It's about whether they open and staff it at this point.
Correct.
And it has a direct impact on Lane County as we get what they call Justice Reinvestment Act funds from House Bill 3194 that passed a couple sessions ago. That money is based on saving money and not opening these prisons. And if the state has to open that prison, they will take money away from our Justice Reinvestment Act dollars that we use in Lane County to hire additional parole and probation officers, to fund sponsors, to fund all sorts of diversion and reintegration programs that have been very successful in reducing our recidivism rate here. So this is just an important piece of collaboration with the state that also helps protect our funding through that House Bill 3194. So I really appreciate the fact that you guys were able to get the jail certified under PREA and that you're able to establish this relationship with the state and help prevent that cost of opening that women's facility.
If I could add one more thing to that, Commissioner, we have 6 beds for males at the Community Correction Center, and we started this last year, and of the 55 or 56 folks we ran through that program, I think 49 or 50 of them successfully transitioned through our program to sponsors and on into the program. So, very successful program.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Bozevich. Further discussion? Then we have before us Order 1701-2407. Do I have a motion?
I'll move approval of the order.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion to the motion. Seeing and hearing none, I will call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, none. Passes unanimously. Thank you, Lieutenant Riley, for being here today.
Thank you.
And we'll move along to item 14B, which is also Sheriff Trapp. And this is a discussion on the public safety 5-year local option levy for renewal. The discussion regarding renewal.
Chair Stewart, Commissioners, sorry, Abbott, Chair Farr, Commissioners, my apologies.
Old habits die hard.
Changed seats with my support role here is now Sergeant Kerry Carver, and I think we have some Health and Human Services staff that could address if there are questions related specifically to the Division of Youth Services. So, again, you have the order there. We'll work our way through it. This is a continuation of the conversation that I initiated with you a couple weeks ago on the renewal of the jail levy. And, for the simple history piece of it, this is a renewal of the levy. The board referred in 2013 was passed by the voters. It's the 55 cents per 1,000 assessed value to fund jail and critical use services. It passed successfully in May of 2013. We are roughly 4 years into it, and for a number of reasons outlined earlier, we have requested the renewal go forward this year as opposed to waiting till the deadline next year. That is in no small part of a concern related to our recruitment and retention. And I think I mentioned in the previous conversation, but as of this morning, I swore in another new deputy sheriff. We have hired in the last 4 years, now as of this morning, 98 deputy sheriffs in the last 4 years, with a total gain of deputy numbers of 38. The levy added 45 positions, so 45 or 46. So we're still short of what the levy provided for in increased staffing 4 years ago, and those recruitment efforts are substantial and ongoing. And I also learned this morning that we're about 2% hiring rate out of our total recruitment efforts of the number of applicants. So this is a critical piece for us operationally, and importantly, it's a critical service to the community that we can't let lapse in the interim. The policy issues, the Lane Code provides you the authority to refer this to the ballot, and it fits within the county's strategic plan in the Safe and Healthy County. There is a potential financial consideration for you to be aware of, and I would request that you consider. I don't have a specific recommendation, however, but there will not be a statewide voters pamphlet existing for this election. So the only option available would be what is termed roughly a ballot information guide. It's not a voters pamphlet. It can be created locally. We actually did this in 2013. The cost for that, I have one estimate that if that was to be created and disseminated to every registered voter in Lane County, that would be roughly $88,000. Now, there's certainly options can be sent to less than every registered voter. There's probably some other options in development that could be less expensive. If there was an interest by the board to pursue that, my recommendation or request would be that we take the previous statement created and provided in a ballot information guide in 2013, utilize that. It's already been created. There's no change in the ballot for the language to be changed. It was vetted by an impartial committee when it was created at the time. So everything is there and exists there. It would be a consideration, a discussion to consider whether the expense of mailing that would be something the board desires. And I won't go through too much of the analysis piece there, but when we came to you last time, there was a request from the board that we return with essentially a roadmap and a timeline of what this would look like to put this forward to the ballot in May. And so on page 4 of your handout there has the processes. I think there's recommendation that a public hearing is scheduled for January 31st, probably a morning and an evening public hearing that would allow people to express their concerns and opinions one way or the other. Board order is attached that has been drafted along with the proposed ballot language that I hope you will find and recognize is substantially the same as it was in 2013. And this would need to be prepared and presented officially to the board for action no later than your meeting on February 14th. And then the ballot materials filed by the elections office no later than February 24th. So all of those timelines are certainly, I think, comfortable within the county administrative staff, meeting them following your direction and decisions this morning.
Thank you, Sheriff Trapp. Just then I'll briefly sum up the timeline from this point forward. What we're discussing today is we do have before us ballot language. We do have before us a proposed ballot or a proposed board order. And as far as timing and implementation, we'd be looking at discussion and expectation of a public hearing both at 9 a.m. on January 31st and a second public hearing at 5:30 p.m. on January 31st. It's not a public hearing in the sense that we have to open the record, close the record, et cetera. It's a hearing from the public more than a public hearing, but it's called a public hearing, right?
Yes, correct.
And then we have before us the board order and also ballot language. So at some point today, then, Sheriff Trapp, you'd like us to maybe have a brief discussion at least on a ballot information guide and whether or not we want to proceed with the expense of mailing a ballot information guide.
Correct. That's, I think, the outstanding question that we had that we were hoping the board would consider and give discussion. I remember from 2013 there was considerable discussion on whether or not a voter's pamphlet would be part of the levy education and information provided to the community from the county. I know that we had a product come of that came out in essentially the voter's guide. It wasn't the voter's pamphlet. And the board at the time followed all of the rules that it would have been required to follow should the board have forwarded a voter's pamphlet impartial or ballot statement, which was the impartial committee approval of that statement. So I believe that we have a very functional educational statement for an information guide that addresses those concerns. It was prepared and approved with a committee of citizens 4 years ago. Since we haven't changed and aren't planning to change anything about the levy and what we're putting forward for the renewal, all of that stands. It's work that's been done. I don't see a reason that we would need to expend additional time and resources unless there's other concerns I'm unaware of. But just the fact that that is a question that was significant last time. I want to make sure we don't overlook that and that the board has the opportunity to be aware of that and consider what their concerns might be on that.
Perfect, and thank you, Sheriff Trapp. From the outset of the discussion, you've been of the opinion that we need to keep the language the same as the ballot measure that passed, and that's what we're looking at today. Questions or comments for Sheriff Trapp? Commissioner Stewart?
Actually, Mr. Chair, I have a question for you. In our supporting document on this item, it actually says the evening of February 7th would be a public hearing. So is the agenda team moving them to both in one day?
We are looking at this point as both hearings being on the same day, on January 31st, on both the morning and the evening, and then with reserving the 7th for discussion regarding any information we are processing from the public hearings and potentially action on February 7th, which would be in our regular meeting during the day.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
So for timing, an evening meeting on February 7th would be after we really probably would be looking at passing the order. Sheriff?
Just to clarify, I think the language we have in this recommendation is that the second hearing would occur before the evening of February 7th, which it could be the morning of February 7th, but I think there's been discussion that for the agenda setting, it fit nicely to have two of them on the 31st, and it would meet that need of having those hearings completed by the evening of February 7th.
All right, thank you.
It makes for a relatively long day for us next Tuesday, but it's a pretty significant event that's occurring that day. So thank you. Further discussion? Questions for the sheriff? We have none. Then let's begin a discussion regarding the expense of, do we want to move forward with the ballot information guide? The sheriff has suggested that we already have essentially the information that was provided and put together by an impartial committee, and we could essentially use the same ballot information guide. Commissioner Lycan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So and that's not to put Commissioner Sorensen on the spot here, but I'd like to hear from him on as far as the a voter's pamphlet type thing. I know from my perspective, last time, I'm not really. I mean, we honestly, my family, I don't even think we even read them. We go online. We'll go online and read the voter's pamphlet, but because the information's out there, we don't spend a lot of time with like something in our hand, whether it's something like levy or candidates, this type of thing. I know through our discussions, I know Commissioner Sorensen, and I respect his opinion a lot because as our senior member here, I think he's gone through a lot of these elections, and I just want to maybe get his perspective because when I heard from him last time it kind of swayed me to, okay, I guess I can agree with a voter's pamphlet. And so, Pete, I don't know if you want to comment on this, because I think in the past you have suggested that's the way to go, but on this being more of a special election, what are your thoughts on that?
Thank you. I do think that the county voters pamphlet is authorized when there's a county election, and the problem with that, of course, is that the county has to pay for that. And I understand also that may trigger other costs, so that when the county says we're going to have a county voters pamphlet, then it opens it up to other elective offices to go into that. And so that's been the, I think, part of the cost associated with it. But I think the general, my general thinking is, if you're going to have an election, you ought to have all the aspects of the election. That includes counting the ballots, that includes mailing them out, that includes telling people what the election is about, that includes a voter's pamphlet, particularly if there's a state statute that says there's such a thing as a county election and county voters pamphlet. So, I would be very interested in knowing what the cost would be, because we can all have our own individual ideas of what an important principle is, which mine is that if you're going to have an election, you should have a voter's pamphlet. But that principle was established long before the internet came along. That principle was established before I knew how much this would cost. So I'm open to some of those kind of features. And but I have held fairly strong views that, if you're going to have an election, it does involve not just one of these things, but looks like an election, talks like an election, is an election. So.
And I appreciate that perspective. I do. Again, I'm likely to use more of an online, but not everybody's comfortable with that, and I appreciate that. So I guess, Mr. Chair, what I'm interested in maybe is going through is maybe getting a cost perspective on what this would look like. Obviously, an election is going to cost money, but I think we all agree this is a pretty important election, and something as far as a ballot measure. But as far as the overall cost, including a ballot, a voter's pamphlet, I'd like to maybe gain some information on that, on the cost, overall cost, and so we can make a decision on how we want to proceed with that. But I'm open either way, and I want to make that clear.
Thank you,
Mr. Chair.
Sheriff, I see Mr. Rickoff's joined us at the table, and I believe he's done some research on those numbers. Is that correct, Mr. Rickoff?
Chair Farr, yes, I have. Thanks to the work of County Clerk Cheryl Betchart, who predicted that this might be a topic of conversation. She provided me with a little bit of information. And of course, just to reiterate, voters' pamphlet is optional. It's not required. Please know that in an odd year election, it is one of the elections where the costs are actually borne by each district holding an election at that time. So it will be, and once a voter's pamphlet is declared open, anyone and everything that is on the ballot has a right to be on the ballot. That means that it not only would be county costs, you would also be adding costs to every jurisdiction that had an initiative, had people up for election. So in addition to our own costs with the predictions of a Florence Fire District, things of that sort, we would be pushing their costs up. It's tough to estimate right now. We do have 245,379 registered voters in Lane County. Please also remember that with the requirements for overseas and military ballots being mailed out at the end of March, that pushes deadlines very quickly for proofing, and everything needs to be proofed. It puts a pretty significant strain on the elections staff, which I must say is relatively bare bones. The estimated cost for us is really under $50,000, but we would need to start figuring out what it would what those costs, additional costs would be to every jurisdiction that may or may not want to have a voter's information guide, but then would be required to follow through and open up and make available a voter's pamphlet.
And do you have information comparing that to the a simple ballot information guide, which would just be a non-biased single pager, perhaps?
We're mailing it to the same number of registered voters, so our costs, whether the costs, our costs really would not change. It depends how many additions, how many people and how many initiatives would therefore want to make use of a voter's pamphlet, how many more pages that would increase, and whether that would change the mailing rate. So there's a lot of unknowns. It would be very clear that the cheapest and quickest way to move forward would be with the voter information guide.
So the voter information guide would give us the benefit of a more swift production, less printing costs, and no additional jurisdiction add-on to the guide. Okay.
Chair Farr, that is correct.
Commissioner Sorensen.
Yeah, so if we put up a website or put onto our website this information, and we did the information guide, what is that total versus what does a voter's pamphlet total? What's the marginal difference there? And I would, at this point, accept a lot or a little as an answer, if you know. Yeah.
I'll take a stab at that. It's my understanding that $88,000 for the ballot information guide is an estimate based on the cost to mail the ballot information guide to what did you say, 245,000 registered voters in Lane County. So if you're not mailing, if you're not printing, and then whatever the printing cost is, but the most significant pieces, as I understand, is the mailing cost. If you're not printing and mailing that, we're developing information that's going to be put online. You're really talking about staff costs, which would be fixed costs for our staff to develop that information, the same information you would put on an information guide and then put it online. So I'd say the cost differential is significant. You're going from 88,000 to something much less than that.
So we wouldn't be mailing the guide. In other words, it's not, my way of thinking about this is the county's thinking of mailing a guide out to all the registered voters so they'll have information about the election. And I'm thinking, well, if they do that, and that's the big cost is the postage, then the incremental cost of having a voter's pamphlet is kind of minor. So could you correct me on or help me understand why that incremental cost, which I believe to be small, isn't worth doing, just to make sure that we have a voter's pamphlet?
Sorry, I think I didn't quite catch what you're saying.
Okay.
Incremental cost.
We're going to spend the time of the folks in the sheriff's office, the legal office, and they're going to make a document that they believe, and they'll probably send it to the Secretary of State's office for blessing. And they'll say, okay, is this a fair statement of the election? Because we don't want to have the commissioners at risk personally for putting out material pro or con on the measure. We want to have it to be as independent as possible and as objective as possible. So we're going to spend all this time, then we're going to print it, then we're going to mail it out to all these people. My question is, what's that incremental cost of doing all that and having a voter's pamphlet?
And I guess what I'm saying is I believe the estimate for the ballot information guide, that estimated cost of $88,000 is largely based on the cost of print and mail. So the development of the information is not the cost. The printing and mailing, 245,000 ballot information guides is the cost. And let me be clear at saying I don't have a position. I don't think anyone up here is recommending that you do one or the other. There certainly are benefits to doing a ballot information guide, and that is that you generate information and you mail it directly to voters, but there's a cost to doing that. And so that's why we're asking for a decision here. There are a number of other mechanisms online and otherwise that don't come with the same cost that we can pursue to put out that information. The question is if you want to make that investment to send that information directly to voters.
Mr. Rickoff responds, then Commissioner Sorensen.
Chair Farr, Commissioner Sorensen, I would like to add that the proofing dates for the ballot and the proofing dates for the voters pamphlet would be done at the exact same time, and we would need to add staff to make sure that's done. Please recognize that we will have somewhere between 266 and 270 different ballot styles. We will have 65 districts. We will have 199 positions and at least 3 measures, all of which would be opened to be included in a voter's pamphlet should we make the decision to open our item to a voter's pamphlet. So that literally could be hundreds of pages of material to proof, review, proof, and mail, all at the expense of the voters in the various districts.
Right. Commissioner Lycan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Greg, so this is actually potentially is a fairly crowded election. Is that what I'm hearing? With the special districts and this type of thing? I mean, is there quite a few different elections that are going on during this time? They're not like major county-wide elections though, is that, or what's involved here?
Correct. Most of these are specific districts. At this point, I know that Florence Fire District, I'd be remiss to try to name them off the top of my head, but I think there are 3 other financial measures that have notified us that they would want to be on the ballot. Most of those are smaller districts. And most of these positions are from smaller districts as well.
So they're fairly localized then.
They're localized.
The public safety measure would be the I would say the largest measure that would be out there.
It's the only countywide. Yes.
And then the other question, and this is maybe to Devin and Sergeant Carver. So and I don't need the answer now, but if it's something you maybe can't come up with, but as far as, so if we decide that maybe it's just too cost prohibitive to go with an actual voter's pamphlet, but instead do something online, maybe and like I said, I'm not expecting an answer now, but if you could potentially provide us information on what it would look like from a public information standpoint to kind of push the information out. So instead of whether it's social media, whether it's online, I don't know. I mean, Commissioner Sorensen mentioned, of course, on our website, which I think is by the way, I just love looking at our new design. I think it's outstanding. But so I don't know if that's something you might be able to answer now or if information can come back. Yeah.
I can address that one. The Sheriff's Office has already begun to work with Youth Services on creating an information guide. We plan on submitting it to the Secretary of State within the next week. They can review it and make sure that the language is impartial so we can start to publicize that information.
That's great. That's excellent. So
the work's almost done.
That answers part of it without a doubt. And then I think there's other avenues that can be done from Lane County's perspective too. So very good. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bozievich.
Thank you. So back when we did this in 2013, we chose to do a voter information guide style publication, and we kind of also were able to connect it with the City of Eugene doing something similar, so it held the cost down considerably. The problem with going to a voter's pamphlet is, we've got everything from Lane Community College, which are countywide elections for those positions, to the Dexter Sanitary District. And any of those candidates, if we have a voter's pamphlet, can pay $300 to get their statement in there. And the $300 does not really cover the cost of looking to see if they meet all the rules according to the Secretary of State's office on their voter pamphlet statement, getting the right size photograph and everything else in there. assembling the pages and then printing up a who knows how many page document and mailing it. If, you've seen most of your voter pamphlets when the state's running them, they're a pretty thick thing, whereas a voter information statement may be just, maybe four sides of it, fold up 8.5 by 11 with 4 sides describing the measure, and then fold it over in half, fairly cheap to mail, as far as a print house goes. That's why that 88,000, 89,000 is a fairly, easy number to predict. The voters pamphlet you can't predict, but if I remember the estimates we were getting back in 2013, they were in the $250,000 range if we had to run a voters pamphlet, because of the staff we'd have to hire to sort through all those candidate statements, get them organized, ready to go to publication, and then produce and mail that book that we'd end up having to mail within a couple weeks. You have to have an enormous temporary staff compared to where we just do a single issue county only. Now we could save $85,000 to $90,000 by having none, and depending on the internet to get our message out there and local media. I don't know how many of you have been accosted by constituents about, I never knew you guys were going to do this, even though we had put stuff on our website and have been in local media. I think I support the idea of having an information guide. I think it's $90,000 well spent. We're asking folks to approve a measure that's going to generate how much over 5 years is it estimated? A couple 100,000? It's 20-some million, 100 million, 20-some million a year. Over the 5 years of the levy, it's going to generate, if it stays 55 cents, it's a significant request to the taxpayers. And I think it's prudent for us to provide individual taxpayers a mailed piece of information. Whether they choose to read it or not is their issue. But I will guarantee you there is a good portion of our population that does not get their information on the internet. I just knowing some of my elderly neighbors and even some of my younger friends are not internet savvy, and do not get any of their information off the internet. And there's a lot of them that also aren't connected to local media. They don't get a newspaper, they don't watch the evening news, they don't listen to a radio station that has a morning news show. So the way you get that information to the voters is, they actually get something in their mailbox, and they may choose to go, oh, that's just another piece of junk mail, I'm not going to read it. And they're probably the same people that aren't going to turn in a ballot. But at least if we mail this neutral piece of information, we've done everything we can to make sure the voters have information about this without exposing ourselves and the districts to a huge cost of a voter's pamphlet. So I would support the idea of having a mailed voter information guide on this subject. Okay. And that saves us also criticism a year down the road from constituents about, I didn't know we were renewing this thing when they get their tax bill in November.
Excellent. Well, then procedurally, currently, Sergeant Carver, you mentioned that the Youth Authority, they're preparing a document that's going to be for the Secretary of State. Would the document they're preparing for testing, shall we say, by the Secretary of State, is that something that would cover the entire levy, or is that just specifically for the juvenile element of the levy?
It's a joint effort between the Sheriff's Office and Youth Services.
Okay, so that is in process. So at the end of this, we're going to have a voter's guide or a ballot information guide.
That will be a fact sheet per se, or information that we can provide to the public. The statement that was utilized in the 2013 guide has already been prepared, and we would be able to utilize almost the exact same statement.
So basically, there's no preparatory time other than saying, go ahead and mail it, send it to the mail house and get it out. So that being said, I guess let's try this. I'm prepared to suggest that we that we instruct you to go forward with the preparation of the voters information guide, ballot information guide, and get the exact cost for mailing, but get ready to mail it in a timely fashion to reach the overseas military personnel, etc. And I'm just saying that me as the chair right now, and look around the board for support or lack of support on that statement.
So I'm just trying to see if I got an answer to my question. Did I get an answer to my question? What's the difference between having staff, as you're doing, prepare a voter's information sheet, print it out, copy it, mail it, as opposed to doing all that and doing a voter's pamphlet? What's the difference between those two numbers? Because I agree with Commissioner Bozovich. The least we should do is get this thing in the hands of Lane County voters through means of a printed piece of mailing that's mailed to them and something on our website. But I still don't think I've received an answer to my question about what's the additional cost to us to my feeling is it's all about the mailing costs, and therefore I'm not hearing there's really any difference in cost.
Chair Farr, Commissioner Sorensen, to answer your earlier question, a lot. It would be staff, it would be the proportion, it would be the staff to do the proofing, it would be the proportionally pages added with those being proofed. It would be pretty significant. I think Commissioner Bozovich's comments about upwards of $250,000 is pretty accurate, depending on how many people choose to avail themselves of putting something in the voter's pamphlet.
So if I may clarify that just briefly, the cost would include the printing of the additional pages, however many there may be, the additional proofing time for the staff and the time to assemble it, yes, as well as the potential for the cost of the actual single unit mailing being higher because it's heavier. Okay.
I just want to be crystal clear. We're talking about three different things. One is a voter pamphlet, which comes in, and I think Commissioner Bozovich sort of articulated this. And when you talk about the potential, of $250,000, the voter pamphlet is the more expensive item that requires us to open it up to all the other taxing entities and districts that have a measure on the ballot. The ballot information guide is what the financial analysis was done on in your memo in here that estimates about $88,000. Less costly than a voter pamphlet, essentially the same impact, I think, in the sense that we're producing a paper document with information about this specific measure and then mailing it directly to 245,000. So there is a differential cost between the voter pamphlet and the ballot information guide. I think you are hearing our staff say the voter pamphlet we view as not really feasible on a number of fronts. The ballot information guide we think is more feasible and less costly. And then the third option is do neither of those and pursue some online things where we don't mail anything out. So maybe I'm the only one that was confused by those, but I wanted to make sure we were crystal clear about those three different items that have three different potential costs to them.
And my suggestion was the middle one with approximately a $90,000 cost. So discussion to that, Commissioner Lycum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is likely going to be a fairly low voter turnout because of this is not a 2018 election. This is a 2017 election. I think what you're probably going to see are people that I would call the very serious voters. They're going to know where to find the information. And if the board wants to go and go ahead and what's your estimation on that? It's 90,000? If the board wants to move forward on that, I'm okay with that. But I would also suggest that this is one of those elections because it's not on the even year that the folks who know this, they're going to find the information out there to look at this as the to vote on the renewal of this levy. That's the only comment I'll have on this. But if the board is fine, I'm okay with this. But I'm also perfectly comfortable by going pretty much on an online basis as well, where the cost isn't as significant because of the reason I think because after Motor Voter we added so many folks to the rolls that it's likely if we send information out, it's just not going to matter. And even saw that during this last election with the presidential election. While the percentage was pretty decent, comparatively speaking, it was actually not as high as it's been in other elections because of how many people were added to the rolls. And you can see that because of the amount of non-affiliateds. I mean, there's more non-affiliateds than Republicans in Springfield now. It's the first time that's ever happened. So, and I think part of it is because they're automatically enrolled non-affiliated and they don't change. And so that's the only comment I'll have. But if the board is interested in moving forward on Chair Farr's suggestion, that kind of that middle, I mean, I'm okay with it. But just kind of a friendly reminder, I think, with this election, what the turnout potentially is going to be here. So, thanks.
Further discussion? We do have the option of kicking the can down to January 31st, but I'd prefer to give you the instructions today to go ahead and continue to prepare the voters' information guide and prepare to mail it to the registered voters in Lane County. So, in light of no opposition to that, let's move forward in that direction.
So just a procedural question. Would that be just something we'd add to the board order in the language of the board order, directing staff to do a voters information thing, or is that just, is general direction and 3 head nods enough for you?
I think I'm comfortable with general direction. It doesn't sound like that was.
What you've directed just now is essentially what was done in 2013, and it was not mentioned or part of the board order then.
Okay, good.
And unless something's changed, and I doubt that it has. So.
Great. Okay. Yeah, and I was just trying to figure out how much that 90,000 is of the total funds raised over 5 years, and it's 1/1000%. So, because it's going to raise 90 million over those 5 years, and it's 90,000. So, it's a pretty small fraction to spend that much to be able to not get the calls from constituents saying we didn't advertise we were having this vote. If they realized it, they wouldn't have thrown their ballots out or whatever. Whatever the usual. To me, I think it's 90,000 well spent.
Excellent. Then we'll move forward. Next week at 9 a.m. we'll have a public hearing or hearing from the public, and then we'll do the same at 5:30 next week. In the meantime, the public will have the proposed ballot language that we have before us right now, and they have also the recommended order that we have before us now, and that will be what the public provides testimony on at 9 o'clock, and again at 5:30 this coming a week from today on Tuesday, the 31st of January. Okay, that's all clear. Very good. Sheriff, Sergeant Carver, thank you very much. Mr. Rickoff, thank you for the clarifications, and we're concluded with that item. Thank you.
Thank you to the youth services. HHS.
Good. Then we'll move along with the balance of our agenda. Next item, Mr. Mokrasky, is a review of assignments.
Can we go back to agenda items?
Yeah, let's do that. And we've had a request of agenda items, a request of the agenda team. We'll reopen that. Commissioner Bozovich was out of range when we discussed that previously. Commissioner Bozovich.
Actually, right about that point, my cell phone battery died after being on the phone all morning. I had one item I wanted to request 3 head nods to direct staff to spend more than 15 minutes on. And we passed this morning our legislative priorities and our legislative principles. And one of our legislative principles is about unfunded mandates. And one of my concerns in the governor's budget, I haven't had a chance to go through the co-chair's budget to see if it hits this limit or not, is it dropped the Community Corrections Act funding to a level where we could opt out of providing parole and probation services directly by the county and actually turn that over to the state. I'd like to have a look at just what that means for Lane County, and a serious enough look that the state realizes that there's risk involved in cutting that particular funding stream to the counties. That said, I think we're doing wonderful work in our parole and probation office, and I'd hate to see us lose control over it because we're coordinating really well with the court system in both drug court and veterans court, and we're working well with sponsors with our parole and probation folks and co-location. We're going to locate we have the new office we opened down in the courthouse for parole and probation, so it's a quicker handoff from court proceedings to there's a lot to be said for keeping it at Lane County. But I think we also need to look at what's the real impact if they do drop that funding level to where it triggers the opt-out ability, and then what's an opt-out look like for Lane County. It's more than a 15-minute question. I think our staff's doing great work. We're getting some great collaboration, but I think it's one of those things we need to have a serious enough look at that legislators understand what they're putting at risk when they're messing around with Community Corrections Act funding. Because we use that funding for a lot of really good work in Lane County when it comes to, drug and alcohol treatment, the various restorative justice programs we have, and to diversion programs and reintegration programs. So if I can get 3 head nods to let staff take a look at that, maybe report back to the board whenever they can get that information together.
So this is a staff time for a report back, not for a work session at this point in time. So it's staff time for a report back. Do I have head nods on that? Yes. So we have 3 head nods on that. So, okay. Very good.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Bozovich, for being patient and getting that out today.
And I apologize for the travel problems I had, but in accordance with our trying to reach 0 traffic deaths, I chose to stop and rest last night instead of trying to make it all the way from San Jose, California. So that's the reason why I'm dressed casually today, but also why I was attending this morning by phone.
Thank you for doing that. Then, Ms. Mokrahysky, the review of assignments, please.
Mr. Chair, would you mind we jumped over county administrator announcements, I think, in trying to get to our time
You're right.
certain.
Thank you.
I won't take a lot of time, but I just had a couple of quick updates I wanted the board to be aware of. First of all, I had the opportunity last week on Martin Luther King Day on Monday. As everyone knows, there's a march and then an event at the Shed. So I had an opportunity to speak at a large group, over 800 people there. It was standing room only capacity. Congressman DeFazio, President Schill, Senator Manning all spoke, and I had the opportunity, along with Mo Young, to address the crowd, and that was and talk about the equity work that Lane County has committed to and what we're doing here in our organization. So it was, I think, really a great event and a message well received. I won't reiterate what Commissioner Lyken said about the Springfield Chamber this morning, but really enjoyed that opportunity to share our story with that interest group as well. And then 2 items, just an update for you on the Courthouse City Hall discussions. We had sent an MOU and a letter to City of Eugene officials. We've had some conversations around that and landed on a project charter. So we're now in the process. We've drafted. Mr. Craner's drafted, and I have reviewed and approved and signed the project charter, which lays out essentially the same process that the MOU did, just in a different format. We've talked to legal counsel about that, and given the desires of our legal counsels and the position we're in to go back to the court, everyone feels like the project charter is a document that achieves our collective goals on that. So I just wanted to provide that as an update. Happy to answer any questions if you have those. It has not been signed yet by the City of Eugene, and I'll give you an update when we do have that signed. And then the last item, I wanted to let you know, so you're not surprised, I've co-authored an opinion piece that'll be sent out, I believe, later this week, along with the eWeb director and the Eugene city manager, that recaps the great work of our public agencies, particularly in Eugene, eWeb, and Lane County, around the emergency response for the storms that happened recently, as well as reminded residents about the need for personal preparedness, family preparedness. So a positive message there around the work that our public employees have done to respond to those emergency challenges, and again, a call to prepare for the big one, as we've had that discussion here in the past. So that's all I had, and I'll move on to a review of assignments unless you have any questions for me.
Questions or comments based on Ms. Mokrahysky's announcements? Thank you, Steve.
Okay. So assignments, I have a number here. to go through. First, we did receive head nods from Commissioner Stewart's request to have staff look at a large animal facility plan, and so we'll look at property search and the need for services and coordinate with other entities as appropriate there. Commissioner Farr had indicated, and we received head nods on that as well, that the discussion related to ORS 181A will be referred to our Equity and Access Advisory Board. It has its first meeting on February 1st, although no business is going to be handled at that meeting. It's more of an orientation. So the next meeting, we'll schedule that discussion. And I will make sure to keep the board updated on that rather complex issue that is multifaceted. But that will be referred to that group. And then Commissioner Bozovich's request here to look at the unfunded mandate provision of state law, particularly as it relates to the opt-out provision for parole and probation, and evaluating the pros and cons of that. So we'll add all those to the list. One update clarification for you, and then one additional item Mr. Kyler is here to have a brief discussion on. On the tobacco-free parks, I just wanted to reiterate there's a question about when is this going to be enacted. It is an ordinance, so it's enacted 30 days from adoption. So it will be enacted within 30 days. It'll be in place in 30 days. What you heard from our staff is that we're going to have an 18-month grace period where we will not actively enforce that new law. We will work to inform, post signage, and educate folks. So I just want to be clear that it's not 18 months until it's enacted. It's enacted in 30 days, 18-month education and grace period.
Which will put us through August of 2019.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So if as long as that's clear, that it's enacted in 30 days, and we're going to go through a process of leaning on education, information, rather than enforcement during that period of time. And then the last item here, I want to just, we've had the board has had the discussion, we've received some direction around a support letter for the Civic Alliance request to the state for lottery bond proceeds. We had this discussion. It was referred to the legislative committee. I want to invite Mr. Kyler up, and we just wanted to make sure the board is fully informed around the conversation around video lottery funds. Of course, you know, there are a couple of ballot measures that were approved statewide, and the legislature is going to be in the position of looking particularly at lottery funds and video lottery funds specifically, and how those resources are allocated. Lane County receives, and all counties receive, a portion of video lottery dollars that are intended to be used for economic development. The board has historically put those to good use in supporting local business retention and expansion. And so as we consider sending a letter of support, we just want to make sure that we frame that letter in the right context around supporting existing video lottery money for economic development purposes, assuming that's what the board wants, the position the board wants to continue to take, and potentially looking at other lottery resources for the project request. So Mr. Kyler may have some additional comments, but we just want to make sure that we have the clarity of guidance from the board before we go draft that letter and send it out.
Good afternoon, Chairman Farr, members of the commission. So just a very brief primer on lottery-backed bonds. As you know, the lottery generates a fair amount of money for the state of Oregon. Long-term trends for lottery are somewhat declining. The lottery has faced a lot of competition from Native American casinos and other mostly Native American casinos and the economy in general. So the lottery about 6 years ago undertook a $215 million retrofit of all its video game terminals, and we did see a little bit of an uptick in lottery revenue as a result of those improvements. When we took this to legislative committee, there were a couple things that were pending. One was the co-chair's budget, and the other was a report from the State Debt Advisory Commission. The State Debt Advisory Commission advises the legislature once per year about how much bonding capacity the state of Oregon has. So that report actually came out, was finalized late last week, the debt advisory report. And you can see it on the internet. Basically, the way lottery bonds work is they, first money out of the lottery is for prizes and for the expenses of the lottery. The second money out is to take 25% of the revenues and just park those into an account to pay for lottery debt, so lottery-backed bond debt. And then the remaining, it goes to the constitutionally provided programs and the statutorily provided programs. So the issue that we faced at Legislative Committee was, is there, the more there are projects that take up debt, does it impact this remaining amount of money, which is already getting squeezed because of the 3 new ballot measures that are, 2 ballot measures that are actually providing additional pressure on that remaining money in the lottery. And indeed, so what you've got is a dynamic where the lottery-backed bonds have a capacity of about, looks like about $200 million in debt service moving forward per year, or excuse me, per biennium. So there's a limited amount of projects that they can fund. I looked back at the projects that they funded in 15-17 and didn't see anything the size of the Civic Stadium request. So that was another thing that made me a little bit nervous. And I think I'll echo your comments this morning, Commissioner Sorensen, about how we are presenting ourselves to the legislature with requests for funding in a constrained fiscal biennium. So those were a couple of things that we talked about. No problem with the project. We love it. It's just the source of the funding, which, as I've indicated, has some constraints and in a way impacts the county economic development dollars. We're seeing in the co-chair's budget already a thing that says that they will be, even though the statute says that the counties get 2.5% of video lottery dollars, they changed that last year to a fixed appropriation, and it appears to me that the signal in the co-chair's budget is they're going to continue to futz with that. So I think we've got some challenges in that side of the lottery equation. As I indicated, there is 25% that's automatically taken off the top for lottery-backed bonds. So,
Thanks, Mr. Kelly. Now, we do have we'll be recessing into what's going to be a lengthy executive session. So what do you need from us at this point?
I think we want to clarify that, ensure that the board, based on that information, would you like to still send a letter of support? And if we do send a letter of support, I think our thought is that, do you support the project and maybe not be specific about the source of funding and allow us flexibility to work with the legislative delegation to see what solutions we can come up with in terms of making sure that the existing resources that support economic development here are maintained, as well as the project that the board has indicated general support for has resources available for it.
Excellent. So that's our decision point. Commissioner Weiken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And real quickly, Steve, I like that idea because, frankly, I'd like to. First of all, I really thought that this was being really supported by the private sector. I'd like to know how much they've raised by the private sector before we start committing video lottery money, if you will. So I like your idea being flexible, not having a committed amount, saying as a board, we say, hey, we support the project. But I got to tell you that, Alex, I appreciate that because you're right. Those ballot measures are going to suck a lot out of what's available for video lottery. I like that idea, not being committed to an amount. Be flexible. Project's great. But I'd also like to get some information exactly how much money they've raised from the private sector because, frankly, I think this is where it should be. Just so folks know, the private sector is what built the sports center in Springfield. That was not public money. That was private sector money that was raised to build that event before Willamette Lane, before Willamette Lane took over on the management side. Thank you.
Okay, we do once again have a lengthy executive session ahead of us. Commissioner Bozievich.
Thank you. I'm just going to very quickly state I'm in support of the project privately funded, if it becomes public money, then my support drops away, because if we're going to publicly fund parks facilities in Eugene, they are sorely lacking in North and West Eugene, and enough money's been spent in South Eugene. And I can't support additional public funding of parks outside of North and West Eugene. And that's all I can say, is that's my support drops away when they ask for public funding.
You sound like a Bethel City Councilor, I know.
What is the status of this letter? I thought we brought this up a couple of weeks ago. Was it sent or not sent?
It was not, because we wanted to have this, we became aware of this information that we believed was new information the board was not aware of. Want to make sure you're aware of it. We will now quickly, if we receive direction from the board here, affirmation from the board, quickly draft that letter based on the new information and at least what I've.
Was there a specific dollar amount that was being requested in the letter, in the draft letter?
$6 million of bond.
Okay.
That's what the project is requesting.
Yeah, they're requesting $6 million in state funding. And our letter is, as you understand it thus far, is going to be, we favor the project.
That's well,
or
the
we
board's
favor.
direction. That's
Yeah,
what I'm
okay.
doing so
Okay.
far, yeah.
Well, I would be at, at the maximum level in this, and I think that you are best able to gauge the temperature of the board on it. But I think that when Citizen Group comes with a specific proposal for specific funding, they want the government the city government, the county government, school district, whatever, to sign on to that request, then I think that we can be a conduit for that request. So to me, this is a good idea. We're in favor of the project. We're in favor of the project at the level they're requesting. But again, that's my perspective.
Which, viewing from looking around the board, that may be a minority perspective, that we would support the proposal without requesting funding. Or we would support the project without requesting funding. Does that sum up?
Or a specific funding source, I guess.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Very good.
Thanks for the extra time.
Then I'm going to be reading us into executive session. Following the executive session, I will recess the regular board meeting, and we will enter executive session. We will adjourn from executive session unless we choose to come back into regular session following the executive session. So at this point, the Board of County Commissioners will meet in executive session to consult with counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192.660(2H), which allows the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for the purposes listed above. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberation during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made in executive session. We reserve the right to come back out into public session should the need arise. Executive session will be held in the Board of County Commissioners conference room. At this point, I will recess the regular meeting of the Board of County Commissioners, and we will enter executive session.